My name is Olivia, I'm 27 years old, and my parents demanded I become a free nanny for the children of my ex-fiancé and the sister who stole him from me. Before I tell you about how I ended up suing them for everything they had, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The silence in that dining room was so heavy you could have cut it with the dull butter knife sitting next to my plate. The only sounds were my 2-year-old nephew banging his spoon against his high chair, and the soft, steady ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall, the same clock that had counted down the seconds to every miserable holiday and forced family dinner of my childhood. I hadn't set foot in this house in 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of peace. But my mother had called, her voice dripping with a fake sweetness that set my teeth on edge, begging me to come for dinner. She said they needed to talk, that they'd made a mistake. A part of me, a tiny, foolish part one thought I'd killed off long ago, whispered that maybe this was it. The apology. The reckoning. I should have known better. Olivia, dear, my mother started, pushing her overcooked pot roast around her plate. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We're so proud of you. That promotion. Director of Marketing. We saw the pictures of your new apartment on Facebook. It's just gorgeous. I didn't respond. I just took a sip of water and waited. My father cleared his throat, his gaze fixed somewhere on the peeling wallpaper behind my head. Things have been difficult for us, Liv. Since I lost my job, your mother has had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital just to keep up with the mortgage. I saw my sister, Chloe, sitting across from me. She looked tired, worn down, with dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't said a word to me all night, just stared at her plate while her youngest child whined in her lap. Next to her sat Ethan. My Ethan. Or he used to be. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just kept cutting his food into smaller and smaller pieces. And with Chloe staying home with the kids, my mother continued, her voice taking on a pleading tone, they're barely scraping by on just Ethan's salary. Childcare is just so expensive these days, you know? I knew where this was going. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I looked at the faces around the table. My mother, the martyr. My father, the defeated man. And Chloe, my baby sister, the one who had taken everything from me, now looking at me with an expression that was a bizarre mix of resentment and entitlement. We had an idea, my mother said, her face brightening as if she'd just solved world hunger. A way we can all help each other, as a family should. Since you have such a flexible position, and I'm sure you could work from home some days, and your apartment is so big. She let the words hang in the air. The spoon banging stopped. The clock in the hall seemed to tick louder. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. They had summoned me here, after 3 years of shunning me, to ask me to babysit the children born from my own personal wreckage. To be a free nanny. A sound escaped my lips before I could stop it. It wasn't a laugh. It was a sharp, brittle noise, like glass shattering on a tile floor. My mother's smile faltered. My father jumped in, his voice gruff. Well, if you're not comfortable with that arrangement, he said, as if offering a generous compromise, you could help pay for a proper babysitter. Given your salary, it wouldn't be a hardship. That was it. That was the moment the last, lingering ember of hope inside me finally turned to ice and ash. I looked at each of them, one by one. They weren't just asking for a favor. They were making a demand. They felt they were owed this. Owed a piece of the life I had built from the rubble they had left behind. I slowly placed my fork down on the plate. The clink echoed in the tense silence. I pushed my chair back from the table, the legs scraping against the worn hardwood floor, and stood up. I placed my palms flat on the table, leaning forward just enough so that every single one of them could see the look in my eyes. My mother's face crumpled. Olivia, please. My father's jaw tightened. Don't you dare be disrespectful. I took a deep breath. The words were right there, on the tip of my tongue, ready to unleash a storm that had been brewing for 3 long years. I opened my mouth to speak. But before I tell you what happened next in that dining room, you need to understand how we got there. You need to understand what they took from me 3 years ago, back when I was 24 and thought I had the perfect life. Life in Denver was simple, but it was beautiful. I had a good job in marketing at a growing tech firm, a cozy one-bedroom apartment downtown that I adored, and I had Ethan. Ethan was everything. We'd only been dating for 6 months, but it was the kind of 6 months that feels like a lifetime. He was a civil engineer, smart and steady, with a slow, easy smile that could make my entire day turn around. We'd spend weekends hiking in the Rockies, getting lost on purpose, and talking for hours about everything and nothing. We were building a future, not just dreaming about one. We had plans. A house in the suburbs, a golden retriever, 2 kids. It was all mapped out, this perfect, happy life. And I wanted my family to be a part of it. Especially my sister, Chloe. She was 2 years younger than me, fresh out of college and still trying to find her footing. Growing up, we'd been inseparable. I was the protective older sister, and she was my shadow. But lately, something had shifted. She was distant, prone to short, clipped answers and little barbs that she'd pass off as jokes. I told myself it was just post-graduation stress. I told myself she was just struggling to find her place in the world while I seemed to have it all figured out. I made excuses for her. I always made excuses for her. I remember being so excited for them to meet Ethan. "They're going to love you," I told him, smoothing down his collar before we walked into my parents' house for Sunday dinner. "Even Chloe will have to admit you're perfect." And at first, it seemed like I was right. My mom was charmed, my dad bonded with him over a shared love for the Denver Broncos. But Chloe, she was strange. She'd smile, but it never reached her eyes. She made a joke in the kitchen while we were getting dessert. I was telling my mom about a necklace Ethan had given me for my birthday. It was a simple silver locket, nothing fancy, but it meant the world to me. Chloe picked it up from my dresser the next week when she came over to borrow a book. A few days later, she called me, crying, saying she'd lost it. She was so sorry. I spent hours comforting her, telling her it was okay, it was just a thing, even as my own heart was breaking. I found it a month later, tucked away in the back of her jewelry box when I was looking for an earring I'd left there. The clasp was broken. "It must have fallen in there by accident," she'd said, not looking at me. "And the clasp was probably just old." I let it go. Another time, at a barbecue with our friends, she pulled me aside. "You know," she said, swirling the wine in her glass, "Ethan is almost too good for our family. Don't you ever worry he's going to wake up one day and realize he could do better?" She patted my arm. "I'm just looking out for you, sis." It felt less like concern and more like a curse. I ignored the red flags. I painted over them in my mind, telling myself I was being paranoid, that I was the lucky one and she was just lashing out. I wanted my perfect life so badly that I refused to see the cracks that were forming right under my feet. The night Ethan proposed was magical. It was a quiet Tuesday, in our apartment, with takeout and a cheap bottle of wine. It wasn't grand, it was just us. Real. When I called my family to tell them, my parents were overjoyed. They insisted on helping pay for the wedding, a gesture that moved me to tears. But when I told Chloe, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Wow," she finally said, her voice flat. "That's fast." "When you know," I said, my happiness too big to be contained by her lack of enthusiasm. "Yeah," she said. "I guess." The next 5 months were a blur of cake tastings, venue visits, and dress fittings. Chloe was my maid of honor, a role she seemed to accept with a sigh, as if it were a chore. She complained about the color of the bridesmaid dresses. She was too busy to come with me to look at flowers. Every decision was met with a subtle eye roll or a passive-aggressive comment. And like a fool, I just kept trying harder, thinking if I just planned the perfect wedding, if I just made everything beautiful and happy, that my sister, my best friend, would come back to me. I thought the wedding was the finish line. I had no idea it was the edge of a cliff. That Tuesday started like any other frantic, pre-wedding Tuesday. I was juggling a major project deadline at work with calls to the caterer and the florist. By 2 in the afternoon, my head was pounding. It wasn't just a regular headache, it was a full-blown migraine, the kind that makes the light feel like daggers in your eyes. My boss, Mrs. Davis, a stern but fair woman, took one look at my pale face and practically ordered me to go home. "The project can wait, Olivia," she said. "Go rest." I was actually a little grateful. I thought I'd surprise Ethan. He usually worked from home on Tuesdays, and the idea of a quiet evening with takeout, away from all the wedding chaos, felt like a gift. Maybe we could just lie on the couch and not talk about seating charts or invitation fonts. Maybe we could just BS again. The drive home was slow. Every traffic light felt like an assault. When I finally got to our apartment building, the silence of the elevator was a relief. I remember fumbling with my keys at the door, my hands shaking slightly from the pain in my head. I unlocked it as quietly as I could, wanting to surprise him. The apartment was still. I kicked off my heels by the door and padded into the living room. His laptop was closed on the coffee table. His briefcase was by the couch. I smiled. He was home. I figured he was on a conference call in the bedroom. He often took them in there because the reception was better. I tiptoed down the short hallway, a little bubble of happiness inflating in my chest despite the migraine. I was going to wrap my arms around him from behind and just hold him. That's all I wanted. I pushed the bedroom door open. And that's when the world didn't just stop. It imploded. It's funny, the things you notice in a moment like that. The way the afternoon light from the window cut across the tangled white sheets. The scent of my lavender linen spray, a scent I'd always found calming, now suddenly suffocating. My favorite quilt, the one my grandmother had made, crumpled at the foot of the bed. And them. Ethan and Chloe. My Ethan. My Chloe. In my bed. Time stretched and warped. A whole lifetime of memories, Chloe and me building forts out of blankets, me holding her hand on her first day of school, her crying on my shoulder after her first breakup, flashed through my mind and then burned to ash in an instant. Ethan scrambled up, his eyes wide with a panic that was almost comical. "Olivia." "Oh God, Olivia." "Baby, I can explain." But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at my sister. She just sat there, pulling the sheet up to her chin, and stared back at me. There was no shame in her eyes. No panic. No regret. There was nothing. Just a flat, bored expression, as if I had just interrupted her while she was watching a dull TV show. That look broke me more than the betrayal itself. Something inside me snapped. The pain in my head vanished, replaced by a terrifyingly cold, clear calm. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked, with perfect composure, over to the corner where our clothes lay in a messy pile on the floor. I picked up his jeans, his shirt. I picked up her dress, the sundress I had bought for her just last month. "Olivia, what are you doing?" Ethan pleaded, trying to get out of the bed, fumbling for something to cover himself with. "Don't do this." I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked out of the bedroom, through the living room, and slid open the glass door to our third-floor balcony. The city air was cool on my skin. I could hear them scrambling behind me, calling my name. But their voices sounded distant, like they were coming from underwater. With a grim sort of satisfaction, I threw their clothes over the railing. I watched as the denim and cotton fluttered down, scattering across the asphalt of the parking lot below like confetti at a funeral. I turned back inside and faced them. They were both standing in the doorway of the living room, Chloe wrapped in another one of my bedsheets. Get out, I said. My voice was eerily quiet, but it carried a weight that made them both flinch. Both of you. Now. Chloe had to shuffle out of my apartment wrapped in a sheet of my 400 thread count Egyptian cotton because every stitch of clothing she owned was decorating a parking space 3 stories down. The sight of her trying to maintain some shred of dignity would have been funny if I hadn't felt like I was dying inside. As soon as the door clicked shut behind them, my legs gave out. I slid down the back of the door and sat on the floor, wrapping my arms around my knees. I don't know how long I sat there. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floor of the apartment that was no longer ours, no longer home. It was just a place. A crime scene. Then, my phone rang, buzzing violently against the hardwood floor. I looked at the screen. Mom. For a split second, a wave of relief washed over me. Mom would fix this. Mom would know what to say. I was so wrong. How dare you, she hissed, the moment I answered. There was no hello, no are you okay? Just pure, venomous rage. How dare you humiliate your sister like that? Throwing her clothes out the window? Making her walk out in a sheet? What were you thinking? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The words felt like a physical blow. What was I thinking? I stammered. Mom, she was in bed with my fiance. Oh, you're always so dramatic, Olivia, she sighed, a sound I had heard my entire life whenever my feelings were inconvenient for her. This is exactly why. The wedding is cancelled, I cut her off, my voice finding a strength I didn't know it had. I'll contact the vendors tomorrow. No, you won't, she said, her tone shifting, becoming unnaturally calm and cold. The wedding is still happening. Your father and I have talked it over with Ethan's parents. We spoke with Ethan and Chloe, too. The wedding will proceed as planned. She paused, and then she delivered the 5 words that would change my life forever. Emma will take your place. I think I stopped breathing. The phone felt slick in my hand. You can't be serious, I whispered. That's insane. We've paid for half this wedding, Olivia, she snapped, all pretense of calm gone. Ethan's parents have paid for their half. Everything is booked and non-refundable. We are not throwing all that money away just because you're having a tantrum. A tantrum? My voice rose, cracking with disbelief. A tantrum? My fiancé and my sister were in my bed. How is that a tantrum? Piper, you need to grow up, she sighed, as if I were a child who refused to share her toys. Stop being so emotional about everything. These things happen. The line went dead. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me. Please, comment with the number 1, and then listen as I tell you what happened next. I don't remember much of that night. I know I cried until my body ached and there were no tears left. I know I screamed into my pillows until my throat was raw. I know I threw up twice, my body physically revolting against the sheer scale of the betrayal. The morning sun found me curled up on the cold tiles of the bathroom floor, still in yesterday's clothes. My phone had been buzzing on and off for hours, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. Each buzz felt like another blow. Finally, around 9 in the morning, I saw a name flash on the screen that wasn't my mother's. It was my cousin, Megan. She was a few years older, and we'd always been close. I answered, my voice a hoarse whisper. Liv, she said, her voice hesitant. I just got off the phone with your mom. She paused, and I could hear her struggling for words. She's been calling everyone. Your aunts, your uncles, everyone. My stomach dropped. What's she saying? She's telling them that Ethan broke up with you because he fell in love with Chloe, Megan said, her voice getting quieter. She's saying it was all very civil and mature, but that you're not handling it well. She took a deep breath. Liv, they're telling everyone the wedding is still on, just with Chloe instead. And they're telling people not to contact you for a while, that you're behaving inappropriately and need time to process things properly. The bathroom tiles felt cool against my forehead as I leaned against the wall. It all clicked into place. They weren't just siding with Chloe. They were actively building a narrative, a twisted fairy tale where my sister was the princess and I was the crazy, hysterical villain locked in the tower. They were isolating me, cutting me off from the entire family support system, all to protect my cheating, backstabbing sister and save face over a few $1,000s in wedding deposits. Something in me shifted then, right there on that bathroom floor. The grief, the screaming, the crying, it all burned away, leaving behind something hard and cold and sharp. It was rage, but it was a quiet, focused kind of rage. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a scandal. I wouldn't cry, or scream, or beg. I would simply disappear from their lives as completely as they had just erased me from theirs. The next morning, I walked into my boss Karen's office before she'd even had her first cup of coffee. I hadn't slept. My eyes were red and swollen. But I stood up straight. I need more work, I told her, my voice steady. The most challenging projects you've got. The ones nobody else wants. I want them all. She studied me over the rim of her glasses. Olivia, you're already handling a full load. And with the wedding just weeks away. There is no wedding, I cut her off. And I need to be busy. Much, much busier. Something in my expression must have convinced her. She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file. The Sterling Project, she said. It's a nightmare. No one's been able to crack it. It's yours if you want it. I want it, I said. That was the beginning. I found a new apartment that weekend, a small studio across town. I changed my phone number and blocked every single family member on every social media platform. And I threw myself into work like it was the only life raft in an ocean of pain. The Sterling Project? I cracked it in 2 weeks. The Impossible Miller account? Completed a month ahead of schedule. Every challenge Mrs. Davis threw at me, I conquered. I worked 14-hour days. I took online business courses at night. I studied our competitors like my life depended on it. In a way, it did. Working was the only thing that kept me from thinking about them, about how Chloe and Ethan were probably living their happily ever after, maybe even in the house we had planned to buy. It was the only thing that kept the image of my mother's cold, dismissive face out of my head. A year passed. I got promoted to senior manager. I didn't celebrate. I just asked for a bigger project. Another year passed. Director of marketing. My salary doubled, then tripled. I started putting money aside, investing, planning. The pain was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but now it was fuel. Every time I felt a pang of loneliness, I stayed at the office an hour later. Every time a memory ambushed me, I opened a textbook. By the 3rd year, I was the youngest vice president in the company's history. And with the money, the first thing I did was buy a gorgeous penthouse apartment in the heart of downtown Denver. The kind of place Ethan and I used to walk past, pressing our noses against the realtor's window, dreaming. But I didn't buy it with him. I bought it on my own, with my own money. And every time I walked through those doors, I felt a fierce, quiet pride that had nothing to do with anyone else. It was mine. I had built it from the ashes. I had survived. I started traveling. At first, it was just small trips, weekend getaways to escape the silence of my new apartment. Santa Fe. Seattle. Chicago. Then, the trips got bigger. Paris in the spring. Tokyo in the fall. The Greek islands in the summer. I posted photos of all of it on Instagram, not to show off, but to remind myself how far I'd come, how big the world was outside of that tiny, suffocating world I had escaped from. It was my digital scrapbook of survival. I was happy. Really, genuinely happy. Not the kind of dependent happiness I thought I had with Ethan, which was all about fitting into someone else's life and meeting their expectations. This was a deeper contentment, a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of, all on my own. I'd heard, through a rare text exchange with my cousin Megan, that Chloe and Ethan had gotten married. She mentioned it casually, probably testing the waters to see if I'd react. I didn't. It felt like hearing about two strangers in a country I'd never visited. Their lives had nothing to do with me anymore. And then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, 3 years and 4 months after I had thrown their clothes off my balcony, my phone rang. I was in my office, reviewing quarterly reports. The number was blocked, no caller ID. I normally would have ignored it, but something made me pick up. Intuition, maybe. Or just morbid curiosity. "Hello?" I said, my voice professional, neutral. There was a pause. And then, a voice that was both sickeningly familiar and strangely distant. "Olivia?" It was my mother. "Sweetheart, is that you?" The saccharine sweetness in her tone made my teeth hurt. She was speaking as if we'd just talked yesterday, as if the last 3 years of silence had never happened. As if she hadn't presided over the complete and utter destruction of my life. "What do you want?" I kept my voice flat. The same tone I used in board meetings when a vendor was trying to sell me something I didn't need. The fake cheerfulness in her voice cracked, just slightly. Your father and I, we need to talk to you. Could you come to the house, please? This Saturday? For dinner? We've had some serious discussions. About everything. About you. I should have hung up. I should have blocked this number like all the others. I should have said, "I have nothing to say to you," and gone back to my reports. Instead, I heard myself saying, "When? Saturday? Around 6? I'll make your favorite, pot roast." "Fine," I said, and hung up before she could say anything else. The rest of the week crawled by. I threw myself into work even harder than usual, trying not to think about the upcoming visit. My assistant caught me staring at my calendar more than once, the Saturday appointment glaring at me like an accusation. What was I doing? Why was I walking back into the lion's den? Part of me knew it was a mistake. But another, stronger part felt a need for closure. To face them not as the broken 24-year-old girl they had cast aside, but as the woman I had become. When Saturday arrived, I spent an hour getting ready. Hair perfectly styled. Makeup flawless. A designer dress I'd bought in Milan, one that cost more than their monthly mortgage payment. If I was walking back into my past, I was going to do it looking like someone they couldn't touch anymore. I drove my new Mercedes slowly through my old neighborhood. It felt smaller, grayer than I remembered. And when I pulled up to my parents' house, I barely recognized it. The place looked tired. Worn down. The garden my mother had once prided herself on was overgrown with weeds. The paint on the porch was peeling, and one of the front steps was cracked. I didn't bother knocking. This wasn't a social call. I walked straight in. The inside of the house hit me with a wave of memories I wasn't prepared for. The same furniture. The same smell of my mom's vanilla candles. The same photos on the walls, though I noticed they'd removed all the ones with me in them. And there they all were, arranged in the living room like some twisted family portrait. My parents, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Chloe, with 2 small children clinging to her legs, one looking about 2, the other barely a year old. And Ethan, standing beside her with his hand on her shoulder, looking exactly the same except for a slight paunch around his middle. I waited for the pain. For the rage. For any of the emotions that had nearly destroyed me 3 years ago. But there was nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness. They were strangers to me now. As irrelevant as the peeling wallpaper behind them. Chloe's eyes ran over my outfit, my designer handbag, my carefully curated appearance. "You look good," she said, and the envy in her voice was so thick you could taste it. I smiled, a sharp, all-teeth smile. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't waste time plotting to steal other people's fiancés. Olivia, my mother's voice held that familiar note of disapproval. Please. Let's all sit down and have a nice dinner. The dinner was anything but nice. It was a masterclass in awkward silence. I picked at the dry, overcooked chicken on my plate, needing something to focus on besides the 4 pairs of eyes that kept darting glances at me. The children, my supposed niece and nephew, were the only ones making any noise. The older one whined about his peas, and the younger one banged a spoon against his high chair with a relentless, maddening rhythm. Finally, my mother cleared her throat, a sound that signaled the beginning of the real reason I was summoned here. "We've been following your success, Olivia," she began, that fake, bright smile plastered on her face again. "Those photos you post from your travels, and that apartment of yours looks absolutely beautiful. Right in the heart of downtown, isn't it?" I took a sip of water, not responding. "And your job," she gushed, glancing at Chloe, who was now staring intently at her plate. "Vice President. We're all so impressed with how well you're doing." I put my fork down. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Why am I here?" I asked, my voice flat and direct. "Because I know it's not to discuss my social media posts." My mother's smile faltered. She pushed her food around her plate before speaking again. "Well, you see, things have been a bit difficult lately." She looked at my father. "Henry, why don't you tell her?" My dad looked older than his years as he spoke, his voice heavy. "I lost my job 3 months ago. Budget cuts. After 30 years with the company. I've had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital," Mom jumped in, "just to keep up with the bills. The mortgage, the utilities, everything's so expensive these days." I kept my face a neutral mask, waiting for the punchline. "And of course, with Chloe staying home with the kids," Mom gestured toward my sister, "they're managing on just Ethan's salary. But with 2 little ones, and with the cost of everything." "What, exactly," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "does any of this have to do with me?" My mother's face brightened, choosing to ignore my tone. "Well, we were thinking. Emma really needs to find a job, but childcare is so expensive these days. And since you have such a flexible position." I stared at her, waiting for her to say it was a joke. It didn't come. A sound escaped my lips. A laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp, brittle, like breaking glass. Are you seriously suggesting that I should babysit for them?" "You have that big apartment," Mom continued, her voice gaining an enthusiastic momentum. "And I'm sure you could work from home some days. The children are really very well behaved." The 2-year-old chose that exact moment to hurl his sippy cup across the room, screaming at the top of his lungs. "This is a joke, right?" I looked around the table. "You're not actually asking me to put my career on hold to be a free nanny for the children of my sister and my ex-fiancé?" "Well," Dad cleared his throat, unable to meet my eyes, "if you're not comfortable with that arrangement, you could help pay for a proper babysitter. Given your salary, it wouldn't be a hardship." I sat back in my chair, genuinely amazed at their audacity. They had ambushed me, served me my mother's mediocre cooking, all to ask me to either play nanny to my sister's kids or open my wallet for them. "No," I said, standing up. The word was final. "Absolutely not. I will not be your babysitter. And I will not be your ATM." That's when the masks came off. Piper, my mother's concerned facade slipped, revealing the raw anger beneath. "How dare you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you." My dad slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. You ungrateful, greedy girl, he shouted, his face turning red. You're sitting there in your designer clothes, living in your luxury apartment, while your sister can barely afford diapers. My sister's financial situation is not my problem, I said, my voice ice cold. You all made your choices 3 years ago. You chose her. You chose him. You made it very clear where your loyalties lay. Now, you get to live with those choices. I walked out to the sound of their screaming. Ethan, to his credit, had the sense to stay quiet, but I could hear my parents calling me every name in the book while Chloe dissolved into loud, theatrical wails about her children. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. That was only the beginning of their war. The next morning, my phone started blowing up with notifications. My mother had posted a lengthy, rambling screed on Facebook about her heartless daughter who had forgotten her roots and abandoned her struggling family. The comments started rolling in immediately, from distant aunts and cousins who had no idea what had really happened. How could she be so cruel? Those poor babies need their aunt. Money changes people. It was annoying, but I just blocked them. But then, they escalated. They declared a war on my life. A week later, I was in the middle of a crucial meeting with our biggest client, the Sterling Project, the very account that had launched my career. My assistant burst in, her face pale. Miss Davis, she stammered, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your family is in the lobby. I excused myself and rushed out. Sure enough, there they were. But they hadn't just shown up. My boss, Mrs. Davis, intercepted me in the hallway, her face grim. She was holding her phone. Olivia, she said, her voice low. You need to see this. She showed me an email. It had been sent to her, and to the CEO of the Sterling Project. It was from an anonymous account, but the language was my mother's. It was a long, rambling letter, full of lies, painting me as a mentally unstable, vindictive woman who was obsessed with her sister's perfect life. It claimed I was erratic and unreliable due to the trauma of my bad breakup 3 years ago. It was a direct, malicious attempt to destroy my career. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. This was an attack. I've already spoken to Sterling's CEO, Mrs. Davis said, her voice firm. I told him it was a malicious lie from a disturbed family member and that you have my full and unconditional support. But Olivia, this is serious. They tried to cost us our biggest account. They tried to ruin your reputation. I just stared at the email on her phone, the vicious words blurring together. I felt a wave of nausea. They hadn't just tried to get money from me. They had actively tried to burn my life to the ground because I had said no. I thanked Mrs. Davis, my voice shaking, and walked toward the lobby. And there they were, making a scene. My mother and father were at the reception desk, demanding to speak to whoever was in charge. My father was shouting, "She can't treat her family this way. We'll see what her boss has to say about this." And Chloe was standing off to the side, both kids in tow, one screaming, one crying, using them as tiny human shields, the perfect picture of a struggling young mother being wronged by her cruel, rich sister. People were staring. Phones were out, recording. I walked straight up to the head of security, a large, no-nonsense man named Marcus who was already moving toward the situation. "Marcus," I said, my voice clear and cold. "Those people are not allowed in this building. Please remove them." I watched as Marcus and his team efficiently escorted my family from the lobby, their shouts echoing off the marble floors. They didn't stop. They got my new address, somehow. I came home one evening to find them camped outside my building's entrance, shouting at me as I tried to get inside. They pounded on my door at random hours, screaming about family obligations and what a horrible person I was. I started taking different routes home, varying my schedule, constantly looking over my shoulder. It was a siege. I was trying to handle it on my own, thinking they'd eventually give up. But the email was the final straw. They weren't just harassing me, they were trying to destroy me. That night, I called my cousin Megan. She had remained neutral through everything, quietly checking in on me every few months. I told her everything that had happened, my voice breaking for the first time in 3 years. "That's it," she said, her voice full of a fury that warmed me. "This ends now. I know a lawyer. She's tough as nails. She handles family cases, restraining orders, that sort of thing. Her name's Jessica Reed." Meeting Jessica Reed was like a breath of fresh air. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a sharp pursuit. She listened to my entire story without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I was done, I handed her a printed copy of the email my mother had sent to my client. She read it, her lips tightening into a thin line. "Well," she said, placing the paper down on her desk. "This isn't just harassment. This is defamation and tortious interference. They didn't just bother you, they intentionally tried to cause you financial harm." For the next 2 weeks, we worked. Jessica was a machine. She helped me organize everything. We got screenshots of every message, every social media post. We subpoenaed the security footage from my office lobby and my apartment building. We got sworn witness statements from my doorman, my assistant, and from Mrs. Davis. We documented every single attempt they'd made to contact me after I had told them to stop. We built a fortress of evidence. "We're asking for a permanent restraining order," Jessica explained as we prepared for court. "They will be legally barred from approaching you, your home, or your workplace. No contact through any means, physical, digital, or through third parties. And," she added, a grim smile on her face, "we're requesting $15,000 in damages for emotional distress and reputation damage. When they tried to get you fired, they opened themselves up to a world of legal trouble." I felt a tremor of fear mixed with a powerful surge of resolve. For 3 years, I had run. I had hidden. I had built a new life in the space they had left behind. Now, it was time to turn around and fight back. It was time to finally put an end to the ghosts of my past. I wasn't prepared for how it would feel to see them in court. They looked smaller somehow, less threatening under the harsh fluorescent lights of the courtroom. My mother had her concerned parent mask on. My father just looked angry and confused. Chloe, who had left the kids at home for once, managed to cry on cue the moment she was called to testify. Their defense was pathetic. It was a rambling, emotional appeal, full of lies and half-truths. Their lawyer argued that they were just a concerned family, worried about their estranged daughter. They claimed the email to my boss was a desperate plea for help, written out of fear for my mental state. They said they only came to my office and my home because they just wanted to see me and make sure I was okay. When it was my turn, I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just stated the facts, calmly and clearly, while Jessica presented the evidence. The security footage of my father screaming at the receptionist. The screenshots of my mother's vicious Facebook posts. The tearful testimony from my assistant about how scared she was when they showed up at the office. And then, Jessica put the email up on the projector for the whole court to see. She had the court clerk read key phrases aloud. "Mentally unstable, erratic behavior, cannot be trusted with important responsibilities." The words hung in the silent courtroom, ugly and undeniable. The judge, a woman with graying hair and tired, intelligent eyes, listened to it all without a single change in her expression. When it was all over, she looked down at my family from the bench, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of profound disappointment in her eyes. "The evidence of a sustained campaign of harassment is clear and substantial," she said, her voice ringing with authority. She wasn't just reading a ruling, she was delivering a judgment. The defendant's actions were not born of concern. They were born of malice and an astonishing sense of entitlement. She looked directly at me. "The restraining order is granted, in full and permanently. The defendants are to have no contact with the plaintiff through any means, direct or indirect, for the rest of their lives. They are not to come within 500 yards of her person, her residence, or her place of employment. A gasp went through the small gallery where a few of my aunts and uncles sat. Furthermore, the judge continued, her gaze sweeping over my parents and Chloe, the court finds that the defendants did, with malicious intent, attempt to interfere with the plaintiff's professional life and damage her reputation. The court therefore awards the requested damages of $15,000. This is ridiculous, my mother jumped up, her mask of concern finally shattering into a million pieces. We're her parents. We have rights. You ungrateful trash, my father shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. After everything we did for you. Chloe simply dissolved into loud, wailing hysterics, crying about her children and how they wouldn't have money for food. The judge's gavel cracked down like a gunshot. The sound was deafening. One more outburst, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously low level, and I will hold all three of you in contempt of court. Your rights as parents ended the moment you began a calculated campaign to destroy your daughter's life and career. She looked at her papers, then back at them, her eyes like chips of ice. Furthermore, given your appalling behavior in my courtroom today, I am adding a $5,000 fine for each defendant, payable to the court, for contempt. Bailiff, escort them out. That was 6 months ago. The restraining order works. It's a legal wall they cannot breach. The damages and the fines, from what Megan tells me, hit them hard financially. My father had to sell his beloved fishing boat, and my mother had to cash out a portion of her retirement fund. I try not to think about them at all. I don't know what they're doing now. I don't know if Chloe and Ethan are still together, if the kids are growing up happy, if my parents have learned anything from all this. And the beautiful, liberating thing is, I don't care. I wake up each morning in my peaceful, quiet apartment. I go to a job that I love, surrounded by people who respect me. I travel. I read. I live my life on my own terms. The hole they left in my life is no longer a gaping wound. It's just a scar, a faint silver line that reminds me not of what I lost, but of what I survived. They say living well is the best revenge. But I'm not even interested in revenge anymore. I'm just living well. And for the first time in a very, very long time, that is more than enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but your support means the world to me. If my journey resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. It helps more than you know.